Donna Summer sold tens of millions of records and built a run of hits that turned her into one of the most recognizable voices in popular music. In the late 1970s, she placed 3 consecutive double albums at #1 on the Billboard 200, a feat no one else has matched. Her records filled dance floors and reshaped what pop production could do, especially once, in the studio, Giorgio Moroder's synthesizers and her voice locked together like circuitry and breath. And still, the label that followed her everywhere, Queen of Disco, never told the whole truth. Because from the moment the world decided what Donna Summer represented, she spent the rest of her career trying to widen the frame. She fought contracts, she fought branding, she fought the idea that one song, one sound, one era could summarize a whole person. Sometimes she won in court, sometimes she won in the studio. Most of the time, the shorthand kept sticking anyway. That tension is the hidden story, a superstar who understood how fame compresses people, and who pushed back again and again, even when pushing back cost her. Before the gowns, before the spotlights, before anyone in the music business had a reason to say her name, Donna Gaines was a kid in Boston learning discipline in church. She grew up in a big family in the Mission Hill neighborhood, and her performance debut happened early, stepping in for a singer who never arrived and discovering she could hold a room without trying to dominate it. She sang at Grant AME Church, where the rules were clear and the expectations were high. Show up, hold the note, respect the room. Gospel is not gentle training. It teaches control. It teaches stamina. It teaches you how to carry emotion without letting emotion carry you. That formation stayed in her voice for the rest of her life. Even when the arrangements went electronic and the lyrics went intimate, the vocal spine stayed church-trained. Clean pitch, long lines, that steady, deliberate push that makes a phrase land exactly where it needs to. It's part of why her voice could sit on top of a relentless dance track and still sound human. It also sat beside a private wound she kept buried for decades. In the 2023 documentary made from her own home footage, her family shared that as a teenager, someone in her church world crossed a line that left real damage. The specifics remain private, but the existence of that harm matters because it helps explain a lifelong pattern. Belief was central to her, and so was the feeling that institutions could claim to protect you while doing the opposite. So when the music industry later tried to turn her into a single, saleable idea, it felt limiting, deeply personal. It touched something older, the experience of being defined by other people's needs and then expected to live inside that definition. By her late teens, she wanted distance, not a weekend away. Distance that could reset her whole life. At 18, she left Boston and joined the Munich cast of Hair. It was a career step, but more importantly, a clean break. It's the kind that forces you to build yourself again from scratch. In Germany, she could be a working singer and actress without the weight of home following her into every room. She learned fast, mostly alone. The early European years were gritty, work-heavy, and unromantic in the way American pop mythology likes to sell them. They were work. Rehearsals, stage performances, late nights, small checks, the slow grind of becoming sharp. She learned German and moved through the local theater and music scene. She took jobs that trained her, not jobs that crowned her. The routine gave her muscle memory and confidence, the kind you don't get from a sudden hit. Europe also gave her anonymity. She could experiment without a public identity snapping shut around her. She could sing different styles and still be Donna, not a headline. She could disappear into the work, and for someone who would later be swallowed by visibility, that mattered. During those years, she met the producers who would change her career, and quietly, the direction of dance music. Giorgio Moroder and Pete Bellotte, their partnership with her went beyond a simple arrangement where a singer shows up to decorate a track. She co-wrote, she made choices, she shaped phrasing, she pushed emotion into songs built on repetition and pulse. Moroder and Bellotte were building a new sound. Synthesizers pushed forward, rhythm treated like architecture, the studio used as an instrument. Donna Summer gave that sound a human center. When she leaned into a line, the track stopped sounding like a machine showing off and started sounding like a person inside it. She also built a personal life in Europe. She married Helmut Summer, and their daughter Mimi was born in 1973. The surname would quietly become part of her public name, Summer, shifting to Summer, a small spelling change. That made it easier for American radio and still kept the trace of where her life had been. The marriage ended a few years later, but the name stayed. It's one of those details that sounds minor until you remember how much of her later career became a fight over names, labels, and what other people decided she stood for. By the time she was ready to return to a wider audience, she had already lived a whole chapter of adulthood off the American grid. That background is important because it explains why she had such a strong sense of self so early. She wasn't a teenager who got famous and then tried to learn who she was. She had already done hard life changes before fame arrived. In 1975, Love to Love You Baby arrived and everything accelerated. The extended version ran close to 17 minutes, built for clubs, and it helped normalize the idea that a dance record could stretch out and live as an environment instead of a 3-minute single. It was also the moment American industry power grabbed hold of her again and decided what she would be. The public conversation moved off structure and production fast. The press fixation landed on the performance itself. Casablanca Records understood what that fixation could do. Neil Bogart's label leaned into a sexualized image with blunt efficiency because it sold fast and it translated easily. Photographs, headlines, club chatter. The way interview questions started drifting toward the same narrow corner. It all taught audiences to see Donna Summer as a concept first and a musician second. She later wrote about the internal conflict around that period. The push and pull between faith, personal comfort, and the demands of a new career that was suddenly moving at high speed. That conflict draws a hard line between a creative choice in the studio and a branding decision that followed her for years. The label had a marketing story it could repeat. She had a private life that didn't match the story. Then came I Feel Love, and whatever box the business had built got reinforced with steel. The track went to #1 in the United Kingdom for 4 weeks, and its influence traveled far beyond disco, electronic pop, house, techno. You can trace a straight line from that hypnotic pulse into the next decades of club music. Decades later, cultural institutions still point to it as a landmark recording because it sounds like a future arriving early. That's the point where the trap takes shape. Her biggest innovations were happening in sound, in the studio, in choices that were hard to explain in a magazine interview. Meanwhile, the simplest story the public could understand was the one the industry kept repeating. Sensual disco superstar. It carried truth, but it left too much out. And incompleteness can become its own kind of lie when it's all anyone allows you to be. By the late 1970s, she was everywhere. She had hits on hits. She was winning awards. And she operated as more than a singer on other people's songs. She co-wrote a large portion of her major catalog, often with Moroder and Bellotte, and she carried a clear sense of authorship, even when the public ignored the writing credits. Her voice was the headline, but the pen was part of her power. In that window, she became the first and only artist to place 3 #1 double albums in a row on the Billboard 200, Live and More, Bad Girls, and on the radio. The numbers were real, but the price was real too, because sustaining that level requires more than talent. It requires a body that can keep going, a mind that can handle constant scrutiny, and a team that treats the person as more than the product. Donna Summer had the talent. She had the drive. What she needed, and rarely had, was a system built to protect her. Behind the public image, she was struggling with depression. In her memoir, she described a crisis in New York in 1976 when she reached a point where she didn't want to be alive anymore, and an unexpected interruption broke the spell. It's an ugly kind of detail to sit with, and it's also necessary because it reframes the era that gets remembered as non-stop success. The glitter years were also the years she was closest to disappearing entirely. She also disclosed later that drugs and alcohol became part of how she tried to tolerate the pace. In her autobiography, she placed addiction alongside other facts of her life without selling it as scandal. That approach fits her. She resisted being turned into an object lesson. She wanted to be treated as a person, which means acknowledging that pain and pressure can coexist with achievement. The industry in that era had no useful language for a female star to say, plainly, that she was not okay. There was no incentive structure for anyone around her to slow down the machine. Tours were booked, albums were scheduled, television appearances were arranged. Her image needed constant maintenance, and constant maintenance meant constant performance. There's a moment in the way people talk about her where they assume she must have loved the role because she played it so well. That assumption confuses skill with comfort. She was excellent at performing, even when she was suffering. Excellence can hide a lot, and still she kept delivering. She starred in the 1978 film Thank God It's Friday and performed Last Dance, a song that won the Academy Award for Best Original Song and a Grammy for her vocal performance. She hit #1 again with the Barbra Streisand duet, No More Tears, Enough Is Enough. By 1979, the run of #1 singles had already placed her in the mainstream pop tier, not just the disco lane. Every new accolade built her fame higher. It also tightened the expectation that she stay in the same shape forever. In January 1980, she made one of the boldest moves of her career. She filed a $10 million lawsuit against Casablanca Records and Filmworks. The filing argued she'd been misled and pressured in ways that benefited the company more than the artist, and it raised serious questions about how closely her business decisions were tied to people who also stood to profit from them. It included claims about business decisions shaped to benefit the label more than the artist, and it named the structure instead of dancing around it. That point is important because the split read as something bigger than creative differences. It became a public challenge to the machinery around her. In legal language, she was arguing that the people meant to protect her had helped steer her into a box she didn't choose. The lawsuit was also a personal declaration. She was done playing the role without terms that respected her as a person. After the split, she became the first artist signed to David Geffen's new label, Geffen Records. That move landed loudly. It was a statement that she was starting over with a different kind of power behind her. She was a flagship signing for a label that wanted credibility, and Geffen was betting on her name to help launch his. Her first Geffen album, The Wanderer, pivoted away from pure disco into rock and new wave textures. It sounded like an artist trying to reroute her own narrative in real time. She was still working with Moroder and Bellotti, but the emphasis shifted. Guitars, tougher drums, a different kind of attitude. If disco had been sold as seduction, The Wanderer carried a kind of restless independence. The shift carried risk, especially as disco backlash in the United States turned loud and ugly. You didn't have to agree with the backlash to feel its effect. Radio formats tightened. Programmers got nervous. Anything connected to disco became a liability in some rooms. Donna Summer was now in the strange position of being treated as a symbol of a genre while she was actively moving away from it. Geffen also pushed her in new directions. By 1982, she was working with Quincy Jones on the self-titled album Donna Summer, an attempt to position her as a modern pop artist outside the old frame. Love Is in Control, Finger on the Trigger became a top 10 hit, and the album widened her palette again. You can hear her trying to turn the page even while the public keeps flipping back. The pivot couldn't erase the label people had stamped on her. It did prove she wouldn't accept that label as the final word. In the early years of the AIDS crisis, a controversy attached itself to her name. Remarks she was alleged to have made at a 1983 concert, framing AIDS as divine punishment and condemning gay people. She denied making those statements, and she maintained that denial for the rest of her life. In 1989, she addressed the issue directly in an interview with The Advocate. She said she had lost friends to AIDS. She said she had done AIDS benefits. She said the quotes people repeated were not hers. That same year, she wrote to Act Up, calling the accusations unjust and unfair, and insisting she had not judged her gay fans or turned away from friends. In 1991, she filed a $25 million libel suit against New York Magazine over an article that repeated the allegations. She spoke publicly when the suit was filed, saying she would never say the things attributed to her. The suit argued the statements were false and defamatory, and that they caused professional damage and emotional distress. This part of her story shows how a story can latch onto a famous name and keep moving, even after the name pushes back, even when the person denies it in print, in interviews, and in court. Whether people believed her or not, the controversy hardened into a permanent footnote. For an artist whose early rise was tied closely to gay clubs and gay audiences, that footnote cut deep. It also landed at a time when she was publicly identifying as a born-again Christian, which made the rumor feel plausible to people who didn't know her and had no interest in nuance. It became easy to flatten her into a stereotype, the disco singer who turned religious and then turned cruel. Flattening is what her career kept getting subjected to, just in different forms. And again, the pattern shows itself. A public identity formed around her that she couldn't fully control, even while she tried. One night in 1983, after a Grammy party at Chasen's in Los Angeles, she went into a restroom and saw the attendant, Onetta Johnson, asleep in her chair, exhausted. The image hit her hard enough that she carried it out of the room and into a song. She later told the story on television, describing the compassion that flooded in before the chorus even existed. It avoided the usual celebrity charm story. It sounded like a songwriter telling you exactly what lit the fuse. She Works Hard for the Money became a major hit, and its core came from real life. It was attention to someone who usually stays invisible. That's why the origin story matters. It cuts through the caricature of Donna Summer as only a glamorous figure from disco's peak. It shows a writer watching ordinary labor and turning it into an anthem. The mid-1980s also reveal how hard it was for her to control her own catalog. In 1981, she recorded a double album called I'm a Rainbow, a project that leaned into pop, new wave, and moodier writing. Geffen shelved it at the time, and it only reached listeners years later. It's another quiet example of how the industry handled her. When she tried to expand, gatekeepers decided whether the expansion would even be allowed to exist. By the end of the decade, she made another full-scale reset. Another Place and Time arrived in 1989, made with the British hitmakers Stock Aitken Waterman, and it gave her a new international hit with This Time I Know It's For Real. The sound was clean, bright, contemporary, and it proved she could step into the late 1980s without dragging a nostalgia sign behind her. She never belonged in amber. She could still compete. In the 1990s, she kept moving between public and private. Endless Summer. In 1994, brought a new generation back to her biggest songs. She and her family moved to Nashville in the mid-1990s, and she took stretches of time away from the constant cycle. She painted, a practice she had developed over years, using it as a different kind of control, a space where she could make something without being packaged. Music still kept finding her. In 1998, she won the very first Grammy for Best Dance Recording for Carry On, a late career moment that connected her directly to the dance world she had helped build. It's one of the cleanest answers to the idea that she was only a 1970s figure. She was still being rewarded for dance music decades later, even as the genre had changed names and shapes. After September 11th, she said the shock stayed with her and pulled her inward for a long stretch. Years later, people close to her said she believed what she breathed in around that time may have mattered when lung cancer entered her life. That belief was personal, not proof, but it tells you how she tried to make sense of a body turning on her. What stayed consistent was her output. Crayons came out in 2008. 3 songs from that album reached the top of Billboard's dance chart. In 2010, To Paris with Love also went to number 1 on Billboard's Dance Club Songs chart. She never stopped making music, even when the public story acted like she belonged only to the 1970s. In 2012, she died in Naples, Florida, at 63 from lung cancer. Her publicist stated that the illness was not related to smoking, and her family kept the details private. Within a year, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, another posthumous confirmation that her impact reached far beyond a niche. It was foundational. Obituaries called her the Queen of Disco because that's the shortcut people knew, but the full legacy is broader. 5 Grammy wins over a career that crossed categories, an Academy Award-winning performance, and recordings that help define how modern pop and dance productions sound. Even if listeners don't know her name, they know the template. The long builds, the pulse that never lets up, the voice that carries emotion without breaking. The most complete version of her life reached the public years later. In 2023, her daughter Brooklyn Sudano and director Roger Ross Williams released Love to Love You, Donna Summer, built largely from Donna's own home footage. That footage is the key. It came from inside her own world. It was Donna filming her own life, quietly building an archive, while the public kept seeing only the costume. The film opened doors she hadn't fully opened in her lifetime. Childhood trauma, the pressures of touring, the private cost of success, the complicated personal relationships behind the public image. And in late 2025, she was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, an institutional acknowledgement of something she fought for while she was alive, that she was a voice and an author. People loved singing along to her hits. The industry took longer to give her full credit for writing them. That timeline is hard to ignore. The cleanest recognition arrived after she was gone. The fuller story arrived after she was gone. Meanwhile, she spent decades doing the work in real time, writing, performing, pivoting, protecting her own sense of self with whatever tools she had. She began as a church singer in Boston, trained by belief and discipline. Fame turned her into a symbol, and she spent the rest of her life trying to stay a person. The symbol never completely disappeared, but neither did the person behind it. Donna Summer's life resists a simple cautionary tale reading about fame. That kind of framing makes it sound like the damage is the price of admission, as if the system is natural and the person is the variable. Her story shows something else: how efficiently an industry can lock a woman into an image, and how long it can take the world to hear what she kept saying all along. The machinery around her rewarded repetition. She kept choosing reinvention. Sometimes the reinvention came from necessity, because the culture moved, and she refused to be left behind. Sometimes it came from principle, because she refused to sell a version of herself that felt false. Either way, the pattern is consistent. She kept asserting ownership over her own identity, even when that ownership came with penalties. She left home young to find freedom. She built a career in Europe before America cared. She went to court when the business around her turned predatory. She changed sounds when the culture wanted her frozen. She wrote songs that pulled attention away from fantasy and toward real life. She returned to dance music later and won awards in a landscape that had been rebuilt on foundations she helped pour. None of that cleared the shorthand, but it does change what the shorthand means. Queen of Disco can be read as a crown, or it can be read as a box. She lived with both, and she never stopped trying to make the box bigger than the people who built it. The work she left behind is the proof. The voice is the proof. The writing is the proof. When you listen closely, you can hear a person insisting on her own dimensions, not by slogans, not by speeches, but by choices made over and over in studios, on stages, and in the quiet spaces in between.